When nightmares creep in a realm with sanity is lost and weak. Welcome to the abyss, retreat shadow inside the GM studio. All things matters, blood and chaos, and time drives unfold in the realm of flow, playing with legends untold.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's edition of Inside the GM Studio, a podcast all about the tabletop RPG hobby. I am your host, Matt.
And I'm David.
And this week, I want to start off with a couple recommendations for at least some of you out there that are looking, that like it when I talk about books, some games that I'm reading. I got two. I'm just going to talk about one. I'll get into the other one later because I haven't read over all of it. The two that I've been reading recently, I've been seeing a lot of buzz on before I can get into Twilight Sword because Twilight Sword is not yet released. That is the next big thing, though. They are going real huge on backer kit. But the ones that I have been reading is, God damn it, where did I put it? It's the first one is Vagabond from Free League, and the next one is Nimble. Nimble is going to be a cool one, which I will hold off on for a while because that one I originally started reading it as it's a mod for D&D 5e to kind of streamline some things, but now they've put out their own little system that I want to kind of get my hands around it a little bit. But Vagabond I thought has been really cool because this scratches an itch. I was going to pull up the book and all that, but I don't need to. I'm just going to quickly talk about it. Vagabond, again, by Free League. Free League, I will always, anything that they put out, I'm going to read it because I love what Free League Publishing makes. So I have talked in the past about not my like huge love of roll under systems, but I like the, when you can roll the skill test and you get like instant, gratification of I've either passed or I haven't so that we can just get going. But I've never liked, in the RPG that I'm creating, I try to do a roll under, but I wanted that feel of when you got a critical success and you rolled a natural 20 or whatever, and you were just like, woohoo, you see big numbers, you get big dopamine from big numbers. Little numbers, you don't get the big dopamine. So I've been trying to think of ways to, make it that if you rolled under, it still felt big, huge goodness. Well, Vagabond has kind of changed that. This is the first time ever I've seen a skill number rollover system that works really well. In this, you have, I think it's 6 or 7 attributes, and each of them can go between 0 and 4, I believe, when you're first starting out. Single number, there's no attribute to them. It's just a mod that goes in there. And then you have your skill numbers that start at 20. Your attribute number that you have minus is a minus in the skill attributes that they are all tied to, as well as if you're proficient, you get to take away another 5. So 20, if you're proficient, goes on to 15, and say if it's a wisdom skill and you have 3 in your wisdom, you get to take away 3. So now you got a 12. You got to roll a 12 or higher in order to get it. In this way, you can still, and it's a D20 roll. In this way, if you get your natural 20, woohoo, big dopamine numbers, it works out real well. And as you level up, much like in Dungeons and Dragons, every couple levels, you get to raise an attribute number. And this, of course, brings the skills down more. There are feats that you can get to give you proficiency in other skills, so they will continue to go down. And it is and the magic system. This is the other thing that I want to talk about because the magic system is fucking phenomenal, and I'm hoping a lot of other game systems do something like this. I'm trying to think of a way to make it better, but I don't know if I can make it better. It's really cool. So it's a mana pool system. The mana pool is super small. It's very small, and I wanted to know why it was so small because this thing is supposed to be a very high action, big, cinematic flair with all the spells that you can do. And as I was reading through how you actually cast spells, it all starts with your class will tell you how many spells you can choose from. Usually it's like 2 or 4 at level 1. But you can choose these spells, and all the spells, none of them do damage. all of them just have effects. And I was like, all right, that's kind of weird. I dig it though, because you can just have a damage spell. You automatically have a damage spell. You just roll Arcana or whatever your spellcasting skill is. And if you succeed, you do a d6 damage. Now, what if you wanted that damage to be fire? Well, you spend 1 mana point to make it fire. Next time, I want to make it ice. Spend 1 mana point to make it ice. This is now you're casting a spell that is a direct attack towards a target. What if I want it to be an area? That's another mana point. So I'm going to make it ice area effect. That is 2 mana points that I'm going to spend to make this happen. I want it to do 2d6 damage. That's another mana point. It's ice for 1 mana point. It's an area of effect for 2 mana points, 3 mana points to make it 2d6 damage. I think this is fantastic. This is this is like one of the best Magic systems I've ever seen. And like I said, it is a very small mana pool because your regular damage, if you're just doing, I'm just affecting this creature with its base effect, you don't have to spend mana at all. It's a cool system. I like it a lot. And I suggest people out there, if you like a very fast and clean system, give Vagabond a try. I've been really enjoying reading through it. The classes are cool. I like that they have each one of them they have like a star rating 1 through 5 of how difficult it is to play the class. They have already the Magus, which is pretty much a sword mage. And that one is like the highest one. I think that had 4 stars out of 5. It's just like, this one is difficult because it's a mix of melee and spell casting, and you don't have a lot of spells with a Magus. They also have, because it is more of a high fantasy, they have the gunslinger with their grit points. It's a cool little system. So I just wanted to bring that up, that for all of you out there that wants to find something easy to play or something new, maybe. It's still a tactical game in spirit, like it still has tactical mechanics, but the rolls are very quick and everything is very quickly resolved as the game plays. So yeah, check it out there. Second on the docket, I got an email from a Jason with the email handle jstud9000 that wanted to know, Matt, I've listened to you talk about playing Shadowrun a few times now, but every time that I've heard you say that you are playing Shadowrun on the show, you never say that you're actually playing the Shadowrun system. You're always playing something else. I've heard you talk about playing an ICRPG and Savage Worlds. Do you ever actually play Shadowrun with Shadowrun rules? I do. I try. I really want to. The reason I don't is because the players that I get to play Shadowrun with me don't want to learn Shadowrun rules. They'll learn Savage World rules. They will learn ICRPG rules. They will learn any other easier system than Shadowrun. And I've had other players before, like my buddy Jason, my buddy Adam, both David and I, our old friend Nate Trierweiler, he was willing to learn Shadowrun. Not a lot of people are willing to learn Shadowrun, at least to where you know the full game. They're willing to learn how to roll the dice. They're willing to learn how the dice pool works and how health works and how armor works. But as soon as you start talking about what kind of modifications do you have to your weapons, what kind of modifications do you have to your cyberware, what is the rating of your comm link, yada, yada, yada. They just kind of give me a blank stare. It's like, you know what? We're not going to worry about any of that. We're not even going to use Shadowrun rules. We will play it in something different. I would love to. I would love to run an actual group through Shadowrun again, because the Shadowrun mechanics make it feel Shadowrun. I do love the world more than the actual mechanics itself. That's why I will always still play it in another game. But yeah, that is the reason why I haven't played in a very long time in the actual Shadowrun mechanics, just because my players don't care to. For this episode, I was reading an article. It wasn't an article. I'm lying. It was a Reddit post about it's some dude talking about how the future of gaming is GM-less. And he wrote like this 5-paragraph thing. The dude just, I mean, as I was reading it, I was like, this guy has never even smelled a woman before. And like, he was just going on and on about how the like GMs do nothing but hinder the players helping create the story, yada yada yada. It sounds like he's been butthurt a lot. Either he doesn't have a lot of friends to play with him, because he talks a lot about solo games and how solo games and collective narrative games are the way of the future for tabletop role-playing games. So when I read this, I texted David a couple days ago and I was like, hey, what do you think of this topic? Why the fuck do we need game masters in this hobby at all? Why do you think we need them? Why are they necessary? And did you get to think about it at all, Dave? Or did you just read it and be like, what?
No, I thought on it a little bit. I didn't know that was the impetus for
Yeah.
wanting to discuss this, because it seemed a little out of left field. I was like, seriously, you sent that to me? And I was like, who the fuck thinks that you can play a RPG without a game master? Like, why wouldn't you need a game master? And so, I guess that makes a little more sense now, where, I mean, to me, you're not playing an RPG without one. Like, and so that's what I thought was, it's like you want to read a choose your own adventure book. Like, that's fine. But like, I would suspect that part of it is that, like you said, maybe he got butthurt or whatever. Like the game isn't, no one wants to GM for him, or they did, but he didn't like the way they ran it, and it was like, I want to make my own kind of game. But so yeah, that's a bizarre position for him to take, but I'll take a stab at trying to at least elucidate what I think a game master brings to pretty much any tabletop role-playing game, possibly even other styles of game. But the first is, you need an independent arbiter. Somebody that's not invested in the narrative in the same way that the players are invested in the narrative. And the reason for that is, sure, maybe a GM does hinder the players telling whatever story that they want. But that's kind of the idea. Because without guardrails on something, without an independent arbiter of the narrative, then it just gets kind of boring. To me, it's like playing GTA on God mode. It's like, you can't die, you can't take damage, you can have whatever weapons you want. That's fun for like a couple hours. You get bored with it really, really fast, because as it turns out, you need some sort of arbiter of something independent of the player's sensibilities. The asymmetry is the heart of an RPG. The disparity between what the GM does, what the rules say, and then what the players do. And the interplay between all three of those is part of what makes it a unique experience. You could say the same thing about rules. Rules just get in the way of players doing what they want. Sure. That's true. That is what rules are designed to do. I wanna fly up to the top of this building, right? It's like, well, but you don't have a fly speed, you don't have that ability to do that. So, but I want to. It's like, yeah, okay. It turns out if you can do whatever you want, then there's no challenge to something, and all you're doing is telling a collective story, which is cool and has its own merits, but I wouldn't call it a RPG. I'll go on with other points I have, but
I'll go ahead and let you know.
Weigh in.
When I started thinking about this, I was like, well, let me scour the internet and see what I can find, aka I put it in Chat GPT, and I asked it to give me why do we need game masters in tabletop role-playing games? And then I asked it to follow up with, give me benefits of having a GM and GM-less games. So the first one here, it told me you don't inherently need a game master for tabletop role-playing games, but traditional RPG structures were built assuming one because of a GM fulfills several critical design functions. First one, David nailed it. Adjudication and arbitration. Rules cannot cover all possible player actions. The GM provides interpretations when rules are unclear or incomplete, final decisions about outcomes, timing, edge cases, and exceptions, and consistency in how the system is applied across the session or campaign. Without a GM, these responsibilities must be distributed, formalized, or automated. Yep, David fucking nailed it. Way to go.
Actually, I was touching on something actually even broader than that, which is like, yes, you need the GM to adjudicate rules and edge cases, precisely because if all of the players are not signed up for the exact same experience, then the GM is the peacekeeper of somebody that like kind of ensures a unilateral experience, so that one player is not playing some, cartoonish dungeon crawl and the other one is playing like a gritty dungeon crawl. Like, because if you don't have anything that to sound off of it, rules wise, then you can just have a very disparate experience. But I was actually talking about like from kind of like a narrative structure, and even in more broad terms, that if no one's setting the benchmarks and in the goalposts, then you can run the campaign, the adventure. Sure, it can go in any direction, but you rob yourself of the ability to be surprised by anything. Like, and to me, that's part of the fun of experiencing a story, whether it's a book, a movie, a video game, an RPG, is that there are things in store for you that you don't know what they are. And when you don't have a game master, then you can't possibly have that. And so it seems to rob yourself of a lot of the fun. It's not even really like a choose your own adventure, because somebody wrote the choose your own adventure book, and you don't know when you go to choose to walk through the forest as opposed to take the high road, you don't actually know what's down there. So in a real way, an RPG without a GM is even more like, it isn't a choose your own adventure. It's even more open than that, because you're just deciding everything. There's no challenges. There's no pitfalls. There's no complications. There's no opportunities to raise the stakes in a way that is, detrimental to you, because you're just going to err on the side of something else. And moreover, there'd be no real stakes to the game, because the ultimate stakes, that your character might die, is never an option. That unless you're just ready to be done playing the game, you're going to neuter that whole experience by just being the one that arbitrates everything.
That goes into a little bit of number 2, dynamic encounter and narrative control. A GM acts as the adaptive engine of the world, presenting challenges that scale to pacing and tone, responding in real time to unexpected player actions, maintaining narrative continuity when players diverge from expected paths. In GM-less games, this job must be handled with procedures, shared authority, or predefined narrative structures. So like David was saying, again, working into it here, yes, there is one person that has the complete narrative control. I don't like saying that, complete narrative control. I shouldn't have said that, but I can't think of anything else that really flows well other than, oh yeah, here we go, maintaining narrative continuity. There it goes, right here on the page that I'm reading off of. Number 3 goes into content generation and world stewardship. The GM typically manages scene framing, descriptions of environments and NPCs, control of adversaries, maintenance of world logic, where GM-less systems often address this through very strict turn-taking rules for who frames scenes, oracle tables or random prompts, distributed control of characters and factions. One thing I didn't understand, because I haven't really gotten into GM-less systems a lot, I do know of like Oracle tables. I've looked at a couple and I've never really learned how to actually use them because GM-less games and solo games don't really, unless it's in like a starter set, they don't really, you know, spark my interest at all. Uh, but
Mm.
I always thought that like people that wanted GM-less games wanted a very open, flowy way of telling a story. But I guess what I've been seeing is no, if you are playing GMless, it's very strict rules, very strict turn order, very strict this, very strict that. It's like, ugh. It seems more, yeah, constrained, constrained than I thought they would want them to be.
Well, I mean, I guess that does kind of make sense because if you're trying to have something that is akin to an adjudicator, um, then you need to have if you're not to run aground of the caution that I gave earlier, which is that the boat is kind of rudderless, then you need to have parameters that are just spelled out. Like
Hmm.
if this happens, then XYZ happens, and if you character A does thing A, then C D E F happens as per the rules. But that doesn't it almost just seems to rob the game of the role playing aspect. It becomes a cause and effect. Basically, like here's what will happen if you do X, and
Hmm.
then there's no dialogue, there's no character, anything. There's no world building. It's just reminds me of that game I used to play with Patrick, Labyrinth. You can play it by yourself. It's a board game with asymmetrical rule structures. And so what you do is you do something and then you look at a little chart and it tells you, okay, if you just did this on the last turn, here's what the bad guy does. Do this. And then you would just move the pieces like for the bad guy that your opponent would normally be played by a person, but you're just playing they're playing the board. And so or a lot maybe like those like Castle Ravenloft or Last Wrath of Ar-Shardalan or Legend of Drizzt, right? There's no GM in that game either. You just
Hmm.
go, okay, I go to my villain phase, I lay a tile, it's a black arrow, I do an event, I read what the event does, I place a monster, the monster's tactics says it does this, I roll for the monsters and the good guys alike. To me it's fun, but it seems to kind of it doesn't feel like a story to me, I guess, as much.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm having trouble grokking what the role playing aspect would be, or if you kind of take turns narrating a scene based on certain parameters. Um, but that's I don't know how that in would enhance the experience unless each player is kind of free to kind of like surprise the other players in like an improv sort of way. Then maybe I could see you could get by with it, but I don't know. I don't think the robot knows what it's talking about.
The last one, number four, in why we need a game master at all, is conflict mediation and table culture. The GM is
Hmm.
often a facilitator, managing spotlight distributions, ensuring player comfort and safety, maintaining pacing and flow. GM-less design requires explicit frameworks for these roles. In short, you don't
Hmm.
need a GM, but the traditional GM role exists because it's a bleh, fucking read words, Matt. It consolidates a complex set of responsibilities that ensure a coherent, responsive, and fair play experience. Um, Before we get into benefits of a game master and non-game master, do you have any thoughts here on the end here, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of touched on that earlier, which is that what a game master, one of the game master's roles is yeah, okay, you could say that they're gonna arbitrate like disputes between players, but
Mm,
at a higher level than that, what you're doing is you're homogenizing the experience, right? You're creating hopefully an experience that you think all of your players are at least somewhat interested in. And like you said, or like the robot said, um, you can choose to share the spotlight because character it's perfectly understandable for players to be self-interested, to be interested in what their characters are doing and believe that they, unless you just have a real super collaborative type of game, um everybody's always going to want more scene time, right? Or maybe they wouldn't, maybe they don't, that's the thing, is you'd have to have a group of players that are all equally comfortable sharing the spotlight and creating interesting scenarios for their fellow players, like an improv troupe. And you would have to have everybody be like equally assertive, right? Because
Hmm.
frankly, sharing the spotlight is not just about giving players that are chomping at the bit to like have an opportunity to do something, that opportunity. It's also about getting players that are comfortable sitting there watching their fellow players do everything in the game and just kind of tagging along. Your role as a G master,
G
as a game
Master.
master, as a G man, your role as a G man, um, is at least in part to get that player to come out of their shell and to go like, okay, hey, hang on, Matt. Like it's like Patrick's turn. Like let's like Patrick, what is your character doing? Like how does you feel about that? Like what is he, and to kind of nudge them to be involved when they might otherwise be uninvolved. There's a certain stripe of player, and I used Patrick as an example, but Beto's to a lesser degree this. There's players fall into kind of a few categories, and we're more familiar with kind of the face and the power gamer. We're more familiar with the kind of I forget what the name of the trope for the real kind of cavalier and brazen player. Matt's in this category. He's a more like move the fucking plot forward. Like
Hmm.
let's get going. I don't care if there's danger. We need to move, right? But there's another type of player that's called the watcher. And basically what he does is he just observes what everyone else is doing. Like he won't do anything. Like he won't do anything. He will not take initiative. He will sit there. He will wait to observe and analyze what every other player is doing before he decides to take any course of action. If you have too many watchers in a group, nobody does anything because
Hmm.
everybody's waiting for someone else to do something. The GM's role, at least in part, is to light a fire under those players, to involve them in the game, to give them external things that happen if they're too passive.
Yeah, the
So
Game Master is the pace car. This is the one that,
yeah,
keep up, keep up. Let's see. Who should we start with? Should we give GM-less games the benefit to start, or should we start with uh, the benefits of having a game master?
I mean, I think we touched on most of the benefits of having a game master, but
Yeah.
we can. I mean, I can try to steel man what what you would gain out of a GM-less game. I guess I'm skeptical that the narrow set of parameters that I laid out are going to be typical,
Yeah.
right? Equally assertive players, players that are fine to like collaborate on a story, players that are fun like are fine to uh share the spotlight equally, to try to give other players as interesting of a thing as they get from the other players. That's just not inherent. We're not used to that, and it seems like it can also be taxing. And
Hmm.
so that's just going to be a very niche type of group. The benefit would be that you you have a lot of agency over what happens, right? Like you're not um you can control like every aspect of the game and make it and totally tailor it to what the group wants. But a good GM should have his finger on the pulse of what his players want anyway. But you can ensure that like the part of the story that you're crafting is something that you enjoy. Um, but that's what's weird about it, is that if you craft a story that you enjoy, you're the author of it, right? Like sure, you could write books that you want to read, but reading and writing are different things, right? Like you write books that you want to read, you design an RPG that you'd want to play in,
Hmm.
but really what you want, the only reason you want to do that is because you want that thing to exist so you can play it, so you can read it.
Yep.
And so that's just kind of a different structure. And so you're never going to be able to tailor it to you, but you could tailor it to the other players and trust that they would be doing the same. So that would be interesting and dynamic and maybe somewhat surprising. Um, and it wouldn't be that any one person involved in the game has enough authority to kind of, it would eliminate that bias that, the GM versus the players thing happens
Hmm.
sometimes, where it's like the GM uh is trying to kill the players, or sometimes players will gripe that they think that their GM is treating them unfairly, or that their GM doesn't understand the rules, and there's no arguing with them because they just have that authority. If it's a more collaborative effort, then you don't run aground of those problems. But the case for a GM-less game seems to only hold much water if you're assuming that the GM that you have is terrible at being a GM. Like these address problems that ought not be there to begin with, and if they are, then a GM-less game might be a benefit. But I wouldn't, like, in my estimation, it's treating a sickness that would be like, it shouldn't be a sickness because your GM shouldn't have those problems. But I don't know.
Hmm. So these kind of go hand in hand, of course, where with the opposite of it is why it's good to have a GM. Uh, but so like shared narrative authority, where less top-down control, emergent stories from collective creativity, stronger collaborative tone, yada yada. These are all great, and they can still happen with a GM. But like I was saying, when it comes to GM-less games, things that you have to worry about, that everybody that is in this group, even if you are alone, you have to work with Oracle tables or Oracle notes, random tables, of course, prompts, and scene framing rules. There's a lot of paperwork and a lot of dice rolls, or however you're
Yeah.
going to find these prompts, that is going to go into this, and that takes up a lot of time. And one thing that
Yeah.
and again, this is what I thought of when I first heard of GM-less players. I thought they didn't want that many rules. I didn't think they wanted that much structure. I thought they did. You want to just sit around and tell a story together and maybe roll some dice here and there. But no, these
Mhm.
are. It seems so strict, and that you would be going rolling off of tables over and over and over again. That where does the actual like story come in? Like you're just running off tables all the time. One good thing I can see, of course, and everybody wants this, lower preparation burden on any single player at all. Since no one has a full time GM, workload is shared. So no prepped encounters, no single point of burnout, rotating responsibilities allows everyone to play. Again, very cool. I think that's like the biggest boon of GM-less games at all.
Sure. But as a counterpoint to that, I would posit again, if you're playing a game where story matters, then yes, maybe no one person has to do all of this work,
Hmm.
because it's kind of like oscillating or whatever. But what you would have to do is coordinate with them, because you can't, your piece, if the story matters, then your piece or whatever doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? So you have to make sure that there's logical and tonal consistency, right? That you're not taking the narrative in a direction that seems totally divorced from what the guy that's going to like do something after you does, right? Like your scene needs to, because it is inherently collaborative, it is necessary that you need to collaborate more. So maybe no one person has the authority, but and consequently doesn't have as much, let's say, prep work. But that prep work, I would argue, is probably just made, like, that time and energy saved is just filled in with the need to collaborate with everybody as to where the story is going. When the
Hmm.
one GM runs a story, he knows where everything goes and he knows what's going to happen, and he, that takes some of the fun out of it for him or her. And but at least there's cohesion, right? Remember when we ran a game together, we alternated every adventure, but we still had to like check in with each other to be
Hmm.
like, hey, this is kind of like where I want things to go. Like it's not going to like run aground of like, if I end this adventure here on this cliffhanger, is that going to like fuck up your mojo of all the stuff you've been preparing? So just imagine now that it was on a session by session level and you had that level of coordination.
Yeah.
That seems like it could be really cumbersome really quickly and wouldn't be something that most players would want.
Mm.
But if you have a group like that, then obviously you need to all be on the same page in some capacity. So
This is where I could see like the incel redditor that I was reading earlier, earlier in the week, where here it says, some players feel that sharing authority creates more equitable storytelling, less risk of unintentional bias or favoritism, clearer boundaries on what can or cannot happen because rules must be explicit. uh I believe that's where some of the, well, that one redditor specifically, when I was reading their post, I could tell that yes, they were very pissed off because of other games that they were in, because of possible bias or favoritism, uh and he wanted more of an equal say in everything about where the story proceeds. uh I think it was a little bit more of just being butthurt than anything, but sure, I could see that.
it's
That's
yeah,
great.
it's well, but that's what's funny though is that that general tact is like what it sounds like to me is just that he didn't feel like enough attention was being paid to him
Hmm.
and and he is like, well, it's more collaborative. It's like, yeah, but here's the thing is I suspect that if you're whinging on about not enough attention being paid to you, I don't know who his GM is. I'm not going to say that there isn't biases. There obviously is, conscious and unconscious. Um, but frankly, if you're that upset about it, then the likelihood is probably that you think that your character deserves more attention, your character, blah, 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 which probably means you're not the kind of player that's going to do well in a highly collaborative environment because you're already just thinking about, well, what about me? It's like, yeah,
Hmm.
but if you're always thinking what about you, then um you're probably not well suited to collaborate in that way, period. So it just sounds like you had a bad GM and that the case for not having a GM is really just that your GM sucks. And so it's like there's nothing that stops like a GM from being collaborative with the players. Sure, it wouldn't be collaborative in the same way, right?
Hmm.
If you uh but you're just like, it sounds like you had like a power drunk DM
Yeah.
and like and yeah, I get it, but this is kind of what the rules are for. The rules
Yep.
are supposed to, I've said this time and again that the rules are there to kind of like be a safeguard for players, that you should be able to point to them. And if your GM's attitude is like, well, I don't want to use that rule or I don't interpret that rule that way, then yeah, he sucks. Like the rules should do something for the players, and
Hmm.
the GM can't just hand wave any and all rule. I mean, he can, but then you could just be like, well, I don't want to play in that game, and
Right.
that's always
The great
that's
rule
what
of no.
yeah, it's like, look, man, I get it. I'm sure that I have been too authoritarian on my players before, and I certainly have known GMs that have done that. Um, I don't get a lot of players arguing with me, but it's the as a GM, you just assume, well, if I'm too much of a jerk, people won't want to play in my games. Like they just won't want to play. And I want people to play with me, so I have to figure out a way to make it nice for everyone. And that seems like enough of a safeguard as opposed to just kind of like, throwing the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak.
Mm.
So,
Uh, to kind of summarize and end on, so with a GM, you're going to get a greater flexibility and improvisation structure to your actual game, session by session, with a lot stronger world coherence. The GM is there to flesh out the world that they are creating, that you're helped to uh, take the bones of the world and kind of create on top of it and put layers on top of it. uh Lower cognitive load for the players alone. Yeah, this is something that not a lot of players really want. This is why they don't ever want to be GMs, and that's why there's forever GMs, because a lot of game masters really enjoy doing this and a lot of players don't. They don't want to have to think about this so much. They want to just come in, roll some dice, and have some fun. Custom pacing and challenge. This is all on the shoulders of the game master yet again. And I love this one that they put in there. It requires a competent and willing GM. Not everybody will do. Thank you, AI.
Yeah.
We appreciate that. That's very nice of you. Higher
I don't care what
preparation.
the robot thinks.
Higher preparation.
People don't tune into this show to listen to what the robot thinks, Matt. They want to know what we think. Stop telling them what the robot thinks.
That's why I said thank you, because I think that's a good one. That's a perfect one. That's one should be screamed from the mountaintops.
Yeah.
Higher preparation and responsibility on one person. Yes, but like I was saying, game masters, I prefer that. I like it. I like that challenge, and I just like being creative in that way.
Like as a point on that is one of the things that it no one seems to be talking about is, yes, the GM has a lot more authority over the game, but that's because he or she does a lot more work into the game, so they're more invested in the game. So you clearly have never, anybody who's advocating that is clearly never put a lot of work into a game, and then only to have your players kind of like undermine that by like you not having any say. Like, I planned out this adventure, I created these characters, I did all this work, and now you want to have some say in like where the narrative goes or whatever. It's like a good GM should probably be open to that. But the reason that they have so much authority is that they have as much authority over the players, should be perfectly in line with how much more responsibility they have than the players. So, there's a variety of sliders there. Some GMs assume basically 100% of the responsibility for the game, and consequently they often tend to be a little more authoritarian because they feel more entitled. Someone that just kind of comes up with a little dungeon crawl expects all the players to come with like their own quest hooks and their own character motivations and kind of like, a list of treasure that they would like to get and like plot beats and really bringing a lot of collaborative effort probably doesn't need to be as authoritarian, because he's like, well, the players are bringing a lot and I'm not doing a whole lot extra. I'm just kind of adjudicating the rules and kind of like, ushering the plot in a certain direction. That can work fine. But I would posit that if you have a bad GM, what they do is they assume their authority is so high because their responsibility is high, and people just feel entitled to kind of get their way. Like if you paid for something, like, a timeshare or something, or whatever, and I paid for 85% of it, I'm probably going to be a little more like strict about getting my way because I paid for almost all of it and you paid for like 5%. It's like,
I'm going to choose the wallpaper.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So it's just kind of like but I do understand why that's a bridge too far for some people. But
no, of course I'm right there with you. And I think that is going to be the end of this episode. That's going to bring it down to the perfect ending right there. But what about all of you out there listening? Did we miss anything? Am I off on some other fucking off the rails here? Am I, talking too much shit? Do you know better? Well, hey, let us know. Write in inside the GM studio at gmail.com. Let me know. Whoa, Matt, this time you went too far, dude. Let me tell you what I know about GM-less games, and let me tell you how you're wrong. I would love to hear from you. I might not bring it up on air, but I would love to read it and know. Or if you got anything else that you want us to talk about, send it in. Just be like, hey, dudes, you should talk about this. This would be interesting. That'd be great. Or you can always just write in and tell us, hey, you guys are doing a good job. Thumbs up, keep it up. Or tell us that we're doing shit. We like that too. But anyway, for this week, for Inside the GM Studio, I have been your host, Matt.
And I am David.
Hey, good night.